rationalize our mind, our hearts, and let us be mindful of you that this teaching should draw us closer to you. Yes. Father, that you just let us be tentative to the word that the pastor is teaching here tonight, and not let it just go in one ear and out the other. Go in and stay there and let it dwell in our hearts and our mind, that we may be able to continue to call on your name in the future. We pray that you let us be able to exemplify you wherever we go. As in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that, sir. Absolutely. All right, so what's going on tonight? How we doing? Everybody doing good? Better this week than we were last week? Good deal. All right. Nobody got fired this week, did it?
But I still got the eyes.
I may actually saw these clips. Everybody's pretty cool. You know, when I see things like that, I have a great appreciation for it. You can't see those types of things and not know that God is real.
Right.
And the Bible even says the heavens are telling about His goodness and His glory. So that shows us that He's in control of everything. That was a very, very humbling thing to see. All right, anything else going on anybody want to share? All right, let's get to it. We got a question this week. Let me pull it up. Carolyn got me last week. I didn't have it, so we got one this week. Got two. Yeah, you actually do have 2 weeks for it. Not by choice. All right. What Bible books tell of end-time events? What Bible books tell of end-time events? What Bible books tell of end-time events? Could be 1, could be 6. What Bible book or books tell of end-time events? All right, everybody got it? Yeah. All right. It will be yes, it will. I'll have to look at my calendar in a minute, but while we're here, we will not have Bible study next week. I'll go ahead and make that announcement now. I'm speaking at Hopewell, and I believe the church has pretty much been in agreement to support that program. So we won't meet here. We'll meet over there at Hopewell, and then we'll meet back here 2 weeks from tonight. So we'll have that 1 week off. The 6th, September the 6th. Okay. The program starts at 7, and Pastor Davidson has informed me, and he wanted me to make sure I let you guys know it's casual night. He said it's actually team jersey night for them. So they're going to all probably have on different team jerseys, and he said you're welcome to do that as well, but it's casual, and they just have a very light and atmosphere, and they just want to focus on the Word. So, 7 p.m. we'll be starting. If you need directions, we can make sure that happens Sunday. We'll try to have some directions and details about everything. Church picnic Saturday. You want to make an announcement about that? You want to go ahead and make an announcement about that?
About the picnic?
Yeah. You want to? Was it about the picnic?
No, about the unit choir.
Oh, okay. I forgot.
No, the unit choir will be singing, and the band will be leaving the church at 6 o'clock.
For next Wednesday.
For next Wednesday.
For next Wednesday. Okay. So there we go. The band will be leaving at 6, and if you want to ride, you can ride. If you want to follow, you can follow. Leaving from here, 6
from
p.m.
here, 6 p.m. Yeah.
All right.
I think it is Saturday, on the field, and from 10 to 3.
10 to 3. All right.
We will be served. We will be served from 11 to 2.
All right. Any other announcements? Any other announcements while we doing the first tonight? All right. So everybody got the question now? We can get to our lesson. All right. Now we were on number 5, right?
Yes.
All right. Did we get to this slide? Talk about that, yep, because we gave that text, 2 Samuel 2:12. All right, so we've been talking about worship, and we're on the example of David when he lost his child and how he responded. And we're talking about learning how to worship in the midst of pain and loss. As we learned last week, that our feelings ought not dictate our worship relationship with God, right? We should learn how to worship Him despite how we feel about what's going on. And He demonstrated that through His life experience. This first point, I want to talk about that a little bit. It's so important that in times of pain and loss, that we move toward God in front instead of away from Him. Why is that important, y'all? Why should we move to God and not away from Him in times of loss and pain?
So you help us.
Absolutely. So He can help us, so He can strengthen us. Somebody else is saying something? One of the tactics the enemy uses is to isolate us, make us feel like we're by ourselves. When we're around people that are like-minded and that are also seeking God like we are, we can be strengthened, we can be encouraged, we can draw off each other. But if He can get you by yourself, then you feel like you're the only one going through something. You're the only person that's made mistakes. You're the only person that's struggling. And that's how people start doing things to themselves or stay in a state of depression because they're not connected to God and the people that are uplifted by God. So it's not, you shouldn't always just run to people and tell your business about things, but it's good to be amongst people who are walking the same walk as you and that are trying to learn the same lessons as you so that we can draw off of and learn from each other. And that's one of the benefits of us coming together for corporate, collective worship and not just worshiping at home. You can worship at home, you praise at home. Somebody was just telling me a little while ago, they watch YouTube and they have church at home. I do that from time to time myself. You can have a good time by yourself, but it does not negate the fact that we get something when we come together collectively that we can't get when we're by ourselves. All right, questions, comments? All right, but note that's one of the tactics he uses, and it usually is strongest when you're going through something, when you've lost something. You may not want to be bothered. You may not want to be around people. That's okay for a season. Don't let that become the normal thing. And don't restrict yourself from connecting with God through worship so that He can renew your strength, so that He can replenish you, so that He can heal your broken places. If you shut Him out, then you're left to deal with it by yourself. Amen. Okay? So David, his thought after his child died, he washed himself, fixed himself up, and he went to worship some more. He went to God. He didn't go away from Him. He went to Him. All right, any questions, comments on that? All right, the next part. It said David showed us that we have to say, I feel so much pain, I'm in agony, but I'm going to go toward God because I need Him more now than ever. Amen. He recognized that in his state of distress and loss, what he really needed would only come from God anyway. So why not go to the one that can supply my need? It's good to have family. It's good to have friends, even church people. But people can't supply your need like God can. Right. They can't be your God for you. You got family that love you. They really love you and care for you. But they can't give you the peace that God gives you. They can't comfort you like God can. So it's good for us to learn about Him so that when we find ourselves in these life difficult moments, we know who to go to, and we know that we can get what we need when we go to Him. Okay? All right. Any questions or comments on that?
It reminds me, Pastor, I was listening to a sermon of T.D. Jakes, and his wife was in so much agony because she had lost a mother, and he wanted so much to comfort her. He said that, but there are some places not even he can go. Only God can.
That's good. That's the truth. That's the truth. And I'm sure many of us can identify with that. You've had some situations in your life that people loved you and they cared about you, but they just couldn't be what you needed at that moment. That's not by coincidence. God can't let somebody else be your God, and then you won't truly trust in Him. So He has to allow you to find that void, but find that void only fulfilled in Him, so that nobody else becomes your substitute for what's real and true and what's needed in your life. And that's a good example, because even your spouse or your child, whoever you're closest to, they can't be there for you. Amen. They can help you, they can support you, they can pray for you, And if you are that person in somebody else's life, don't try to be their savior. You can pray for them, be there for them, but try to help them whatever way you can to reconnect with God in the way that's comfortable for them. Because they can't get what's needed from you. Okay? That's a good point. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So you think it's important that we know how to acknowledge that pain, though? Because even though God knows what we need, He knows what we're going through, He wants us to acknowledge what we're going through and ask Him.
Right.
Don't you think? 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
instead of, I always keep a stiff upper lip, everything's all right, it's all good. But it comes a time you gotta say, look, Lord, I need your help.
Yes. Yes,
And
ma'am.
He comes through.
Oh, yeah.
Like just waiting on you, you know, but sometimes it's good to acknowledge to Him, whether or not you acknowledge other people.
Right.
But acknowledge to Him that you do need.
Absolutely. The Bible teaches us to do that, to confess, to make confession. But why? Why does He want us to confess or to acknowledge what our issue is, what our weakness is, what we need from Him? What does that do for us? Why do we need to acknowledge it sometimes? To let us know He's in control. Okay.
He will be there for us.
All right. I like that. I heard somebody around in here. Anybody else?
Shows him that we got faith in him.
Shows Him that we have faith in Him. Absolutely. Very good. Anybody else? And that's what I was going to say. It's a humbling thing because it does help us to realize that we can trust Him, that we can depend on Him, but we have to also acknowledge that we have something that makes us imperfect, that makes us where we have to have Him, where we need Him. So it puts us in a vulnerable place where we can only get what's needed from Him as our true source. Okay? And then when you confess it, you're recognizing that and you're demonstrating your faith in Him because you know that He's the answer to what's needed. Okay? So it is an act of faith as well. All right. Anybody else? All right. So let's keep moving. So we learned from David that despite the pain that we feel, we got to learn to worship anyway. All right. And then 6. We're at the last one. Worship is celebrating who God is and what He has done. After you have learned through your highs and your lows, your times of loss, all your pain, and you find out that He's still faithful, it ought to make you want to just praise Him and worship Him for who He is and to thank Him for what He's done. And that song, we all know it very well, but I want us to read it and get some more depth from it today. So let's look in our Bible, Psalm 100. Let's look at it and read it. I think I've said it before. I hope I have, because I really believe it. When you've gone through something and you've learned and connected with God, it changes the way you praise. You don't praise God the same way on the other side of going through as you did on the front side. Before I praised it because Mama said to do it.
Right.
I did it because that's what everybody else in church was doing. Now I do it because I know what He did for Tremaine. What He's still yet doing for Tremaine. So it has a personal connection with it now to what I've gone through versus what He did in the beginning. It's good to start out that way, but I shouldn't be 70, 80 years old still praising because that's what Mama and them did. Amen. If that's the case, you miss the whole point of what your life was to teach you. Okay? All right, let's read this a little bit. We know it in King James, so let's read it in King James all the way through. And then I want somebody in another translation to read it, and we're going to break it down a little bit.
Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before His presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, He is good. It is He that has made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people, and the sheep of His pasture. Enter into His gates with thanksgiving, and into His courts with praise. Be thankful unto Him, and bless His name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endureth to all generations.
There's something about this psalm here, y'all. It's a powerful psalm. It makes you want to praise God. All right, somebody with another translation, let's start reading a little bit of this. Let's talk about it as we go.
shout praises to the Lord. Everyone on this earth, be joyful and sing as you come in to worship the Lord.
All right, let's stop there, Elder Lockhart. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's go read that again, part 2, the second verse.
Be joyful and sing as you come into worship the
All
Lord.
right, now that's talking about when we come to church. Should we come in here sad? No. We come in here mad? No. How does it tell us to come in here? Joy. What is joy? Is joy happiness?
Yes.
No, not happiness. There's a difference between happiness and joy. Anybody know the difference? All right, happiness comes and goes. Joy lasts, right?
Happiness will be based on like circumstances. The joy is like something you have, and even though you're going through something, you still know that God is with you.
Very good. Let's dive on that a little bit. Happiness is based on circumstances that come and go, that changes. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. But joy is based on the truth about who God is and what He says about my circumstances.
It gives you a sense of peace.
Gives you a sense of peace. But understand that joy is based on the truth that God gives me about my circumstances. Happiness is based on the circumstance itself. Joy is based on what God got to say about the matter. So it changes you. You might be having a bad circumstance, but when God says He's going to be with me, He's going to take care of it, I'm coming out victorious, now I can be joyful in the midst of a bad circumstance. Because I know it's not here to last. It's only, you said the word, it's only temporary. I was just ready to say that. That can give you a joy. And then like it's been stated, the joy I have, it didn't come from the world because the world was circumstantial. It was up and down. And so since the world didn't give it to me, the world cannot dictate or take it away from me because it's not based on the world. It's based on the victory I have over what the world provides. Amen. Okay? That's good right there. Questions, comments?
So happiness is based on self, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Joy is based on God.
There you
That's
go.
our heart.
I like that. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say happiness is an outward appearance. Joy is inside
Yeah.
comes to the house.
Very good. That's good. I like
That's
that.
good too.
Yeah. Yeah. It starts on the inside and it comes out in expressions. But it's not just the outward expression. That's good. That's good.
You saying happiness is based on self and joy is based on what?
On God.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a
Easy,
good
I
note.
can remember that.
That's good. Personalize. Make it what you need to know so that we can come in here joyful. Well, let's read that again, Elder Lockhart. Read the second verse. Let's keep going this time.
Be joyful and sing as you come in to worship the Lord. You know the Lord is God. He created us, and we belong to Him. We are His people, the sheep in His pasture.
All right, let's talk about that. Somebody else might not know He's God. You know He's God. So you don't let somebody else dictate whether or not you praise or how you praise. Let your praise be the springboard that starts everybody else's praise. Come in here with an expectation to celebrate who God is and what He's done. Go back to verse 2 again. Read that one more time. Read the top of verse 3. The way your translation reads.
Be joyful and sing as you come in to worship the Lord.
All right. What I thought of when you were reading that, have you all ever noticed, we've done it a couple times here, but I want to improve on that. Have you noticed the difference between a place where there's music playing before you get there versus nothing happening when you get there? Have you ever been in a place where the atmosphere was kind of set as a prelude? Or has anybody ever paid attention to that? Before you get somewhere, if the atmosphere has been prepared, the presence of God is realized that much more. See, He inhabits praise, so He shows up where praise is happening. So before we physically can get into a place, if there's praise already taking place, God waiting on you when you get in there. See that? So that's one thing I want us to learn as people that, as we prepare for worship. It doesn't have to start right at 11 a.m. when we start singing. There can be a praise that preludes or precedes what we're about to do to set the atmosphere for God so that He's there when we get there. All right? We kind of had a touch of that Sunday.
I was going to say,
Yeah, the presence of God was there. And we set the tone because I believe we focused our minds towards it. And we allow God to take control. We need to make sure we try to keep God in a place where He dictates everything that happens. It's good to make preparations. It's good to prepare. We should do that. And it's good to have an order of how we should do things. But when God shows up, we got to be sensitive and let Him kind of guide us on this journey as we're expressing our gratitude to Him. And then amazing things can happen when God shows up. Okay? Any questions or comments? All right, so let's read verse 3 now. We keep moving.
You know that the Lord is God. He created us, and we belong to Him. We are His people, the sheep in His pasture. Be thankful and praise the Lord as you enter His temple. The Lord is good. His love and faithfulness will last forever.
Amen. All right. Even when your circumstances are not good, God is still good. And because He's still good, He still deserves our expression of praise and gratitude. All right. Questions, comments? All right. So we started this by asking and talking about what is worship? Is worship necessary? Does it really matter? So does worship really matter?
Yes.
It absolutely matters. And not only does it matter, it is the one thing that keeps us connected to God. Nobody can take your worship away from you. You can put it down, and you then put down your connection with God. But as long as you keep worship as a part of your life, then it keeps you in a place where you can stay connected with God, and He then can give you what's needed to help you in every situation you face in life. Okay? All right. Any other questions or comments on that? All right. So we're going to go back and pick up where we stopped with stewardship. If you don't have a book, somebody can help me distribute these boxes. Everybody needs. I need a book. Now we ordered some more. So if you don't have one, you can raise your hand. We can distribute a few of them. All right, see a couple hands up. Anybody need one? You need to borrow one? Just go ahead, raise your hand. All right, we're on page 12. Third lesson, page 12. Page 12. All right. So we've been talking about worship. Now, stewardship is part of worship. Yes. All right, how so? How is stewardship part of worship?
The way of
What's that?
giving to the Lord what He has given us.
Giving to the Lord what He's given us, okay? All right, anybody else?
I guess we'll go back to the definition of what worship is. And if worship is about God, serving God, then in us being stewards, we're serving God through our giving.
Very good. Y'all hear what she said? And that's the truth. You got to go back to what worship is. Worship is based on God, who He is, and what He's asked of us. And when we're giving, when we're stewarding those things which He has trusted to us, we talked about that prior to where we are now, about Him entrusting to us His resources, then as an act of worship, I'm seeking God on how to manage that which He's given to me. And then I'm also, in my giving, I'm putting Him first, which is a sign of worship, by bringing to Him what He's asked and trusting Him to manage everything else. So worship is an example. Stewardship and giving is an example of worship because I'm setting God in His first top priority, and then everything else is governed by that relationship I have with Him. All right, so now we're going to talk about Jesus as our example and how he teaches us about the importance of stewardship. Somebody read the first paragraph.
Jesus knew human nature. He saw men ruined from time and eternity because of their love for money and the things money will buy. They put money before men, things before life, means before ends, last things before first things, little things before big things, and mammon before God. Jesus proposed purpose to correct this evil.
All right, now this is, again, the main focal point of this as we're talking about stewardship. It is money. Why money? Why is the focus on money? What's that? It gets our attention. We recognize how important money is to our well-being and our ability to live in this world. So he recognizes and takes one of the things that's most important to us and teaches us how to stay connected with him through that thing and not allowing that thing to become our God. Now, other things can become your God too. We talked about people, we talked about jobs, we talked about astrology, whatever. Your home, your car, your material things. All these things can become idols or God as well. But money is probably the more common and one of the ones that Jesus dealt with. Why do you think we as a man, talking about the race of man, I mean the species of mankind, why do we struggle with money? Why do you think that becomes such an evil thing?
Because a lot of people think money will buy you happiness.
A lot of people think money will buy you happiness. We talked about that a minute ago.
Power.
Power. That's a big one. That is a big one. All right, anybody else? Right?
It seems to be the thing that gets you what you need and what you want.
Very good. It seems to be the thing that gets you what you need and what you want. The Bible teaches us that the enemy is deceptive and he emulates what God does. So he becomes a form of provision in the form of money, but then when you put your focus on the money, it becomes a substitute for your true source, who is God. So he tries to duplicate what God does, and he does it through the act of money. So that's why the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, because when you love money, you're loving the enemy who uses money to distract us from God. And if your love is in money, you don't have room to love God. You got that? All right, questions, comments? All right, let's keep going.
Jesus' purpose to correct this evil. He no doubt said more on the subject of money and material possessions than any other subject.
Read that part again, Ann.
Jesus proposed to correct this evil. He no doubt said more on the subject of money and material possessions than any other subject.
Did y'all know that? In his teachings and his preaching, Jesus taught on money and issues surrounding money even more than he did any other subject. And he taught on a lot of different subjects. A lot of them are extremely important. But he spoke on this continuously. Why? Does anybody know why? Because it was
if you had it, he wanted to make sure you did the right things with it.
all right.
Because there are those that have and those that go without, and those that have could help and they do not.
Okay.
So he wants to explain it to us what we should and should not be doing with it.
All right. Anybody else?
I think it's a form of protecting us against money because it is the root of all evil.
Right.
And he wanted to strengthen us in knowing the evilness of money. As his sheep, he wanted to prepare us, and that's why I feel like he talked on it so much.
Very good. Very good. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I just think it's just like a parent trying to warn his kids about danger. So I think that's what he was trying to do going on.
Right.
Everybody else was saying, this is showing us that, some rich people or some people use it for evil. So it's just a warning.
Very good. All three are correct. And it helps us see that money was just a bigger problem back then as it is now. And that he being the loving father that he is, they're right. He's trying to focus our attention towards one area in particular that he knows and recognizes that becomes a distraction and a hindrance from us having an open, uninterrupted relationship with him. It shows up deceptively in the form of money. And it happens a lot of times so subtly that we don't even realize that it becomes a problem, and it robs us of our worship. If we're not careful, this one thing can become a distraction and a hindrance to our worship, which connects us to God. Yes, ma'am?
I feel like in a sense of the word, that's one of the biggest things the enemy has bait from the enemy.
Very good. Absolutely. And you know what bait is for? It's to trap you and to reel you in. You're right. That's good. He uses that because he knows if he just blatantly tries to stop us from worshiping, we love God too much to do that. But if he can subtly create in us a need to rely on this resource, then we are applying our faith in the resource and not in God. And if we don't really feel like we need God, we won't worship him. And if we don't worship him, then we can't do what he created us to do. So she's right. He uses it as bait to deceptively disconnect us from our God. All right, so Jesus took time to teach his people and to teach us the importance of recognizing this evil, recognizing the danger that's around it, so that we can now make sure it does not become a hindrance and a distraction in our lives.
That's why our parents, they didn't have a lot of money, a lot of parents. They were close to God. They had the spirit of the gospel that everybody got a good job, man. They think I got a job, I need God.
That's a good point right there, y'all. Have you ever thought about that? That's exactly right. And for those that couldn't hear, she was saying our foreparents, they didn't have a lot of things. They didn't have the great jobs, whatever. But they had a connection with God that is missing today. And it's because, I honestly do believe, they were not distracted by a lot of the things that have become distractions for us in this world today. You're absolutely right. And so we can learn. It doesn't mean that we have to strip ourselves of everything that we have attained. But what it does teach us is to not let go of what they had as their foundation. And that was their relationship, their awareness, their knowing of who God was and his ability to provide. And that's what they worshiped. He provided because they didn't have any other means. Just because I got a $100,000 job didn't mean that's my means. God is still my means. So it's up to me to learn the same lessons they learned so that my money don't get replaced with God that brought me where I am. Okay? All right. Good point. Anybody else?
Pastor,
Yes.
Plus, they weren't jealous either.
Yeah, that's good. You're right.
Right.
That's right. Y'all talking the truth. They weren't jealous, and when somebody was blessed, they celebrated it because they recognized it as the provision of God. And then the person that received shared with other folks. They didn't hold on to it. They shared what they had, and God kept blessing. It's amazing that they did what they were able to do with the little that they had. It blows my mind that people with 10, 11, 12 kids. Come on, y'all. Y'all know what I'm saying. But God. And a lot of times, I've heard people talk about, this is in my experience in my little situation, they didn't even realize they were poor. They didn't realize that they were missing anything. Yeah. So we don't need things to have happiness and to have fulfillment and joy. We just need a relationship and a connection with God. All right. Yes, sir.
Believe it or not, Pastor, I think last year, it's funny because you preached a sermon on using what you got to glorify God.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Whatever you have, whether it's great or small, use what you have as God gives you the awareness of how to use it. That's Colossians 3:23. Whatever. Let's read that, Trevor. That's a good point. Let's turn to that. Colossians in the New Testament. Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. 3rd chapter should be verse 23. Let's see what we got there. start. Let's read 22 and 23. Colossians 3rd chapter, verse 22 and 23.
Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. Serve them sincerely because of your reverent fear of the Lord. Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you are working for the Lord rather than for people.
24.
Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that your master you are serving is Christ.
Very good. Somebody read it in another translation. 22, 23, and 24.
Servant, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ.
There is something supernatural about God taking whatever you have, when you sincerely give it to Him, and accomplishing great and much with it. There's something about it, y'all. And it does not take much. But whatever you have, use it and use it for the glory of God, and it can accomplish much. This Bible is full of examples of that, and not only just the Bible, many people's lives. We just talked about our ancestors. They're examples of that. But many of us in here can talk about, a lot of times, the progression that we have in our relationship with God now began with a small thing. It began with a small bit of faith. It began with a small trust in God. And whatever we had, we gave it to Him, and He has the ability to multiply it and accomplish much. Because God don't need, it's not about the amount. It's about the heart that's connected in worship.
Amen.
Okay? All right. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? All right, let's go back to our book and let's finish reading where we left off. I think we still first paragraph. All right, let's keep going.
He knew the needs of such teachings. He knew the danger and deceitfulness of riches. He illustrated his views with many parables. He lived the lessons he taught.
He not only taught in parables so they could understand, but he also lived what he taught. Do not teach lessons that you aren't living. People don't care about what you say, they care about what you do. And you can do more harm than good if you're saying one thing and doing something else. You can't get on somebody about tithing if you don't tithe. You can't get on somebody about helping someone else if you never take time to help someone else. But don't do it so that you can tell somebody what to do. Do it because God trusts you to do it, and you know that it's what the least you can do for what He's done. Okay? Questions, comments? All right, let's talk about Jesus, the ideal steward.
When Jesus was tempted to turn stones into bread, he resisted, saying, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of his mouth, out of the mouth of God."
All right, we know that temptation. It is in Matthew 4th chapter. What was he being tempted to do by turning the stones into bread? What was that temptation about? Say what?
Satan wanted to prove that he was God.
He did. He wanted him to prove that he was God. But this one in particular is about even more specific, a need.
Oh, I can fast.
Accommodating your flesh.
Say what?
Accommodating your flesh.
Accommodating your flesh. Who? Somebody else is talking? Anybody else?
He was hungry, and Satan was asking him to turn it into bread.
Very good.
But he was by physical hunger. He had been on the fast.
Okay. All right. You dibbling around a little bit. Okay. Anybody else?
He wanted him to turn those stones into bread because he was hungry, and basically trying to tell him that right there. Basically trying to turn him away from what God's provided for him.
Yeah, we get really close. Anybody else want to go before I get into it? All right, let's tie them all together. He was tempting him to act in his godliness, even though it was not what God wanted him to do. He was fasting to strip himself of his fleshly dependence upon things. So, in his moment of weakness, he was being tempted to satisfy his flesh, which was stated, by his own means and methods. And that's kind of what she's talking about. He was tempted to start trying to find ways to provide for himself. Y'all get what I'm saying? It's the same temptation that we have to try to provide our own needs. When we have a need, when we have a situation that we need to have handled, and we try to attain money any means possible, we're giving in to that temptation of trying to turn bread into turn the stone into bread. Okay? But instead, Jesus gave the remedy to that. He said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. He was saying the counter to that is not to try to provide your own need, but to seek God's word on what's needed so that you can then have your need provided for the God way and not the self way. Y'all see that? So that's what he was being tempted to do, is to provide for his physical needs in his flesh, by his flesh. Okay? That's what the real temptation was for that particular one. All right, let's keep going.
When Satan offered the kingdoms of the world to Jesus, if he would fall down and worship him, Jesus replied, "Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve."
All right.
Matthew 4 and 10.
That's another one. So what is he being tempted on that time? He offered him the kingdoms of the world. I think Mother Cable was talking about this one. Kingdoms of the world, to see if Jesus would fall down and worship him. What was he being tempted to do then? So what?
To serve.
Acceptance and power.
I'd say he was trying to get him to say that if you serve me, I give you everything, thinking that Jesus would realize that my Father owns everything. See, he's trying to deceive you that you might not have it now, but because he's promised us that we're going to have everything if we trust him.
Very good.
But then but the devil is trying to tell, or Satan is trying to tell Jesus now, see, you got it. It's right there. All you got to do is bow down to me.
Very good. All right. Stop Trevor's hand.
This is what comes on YouTube. They do different Christian things in the Bible, and they were simply talking about this scripture, and Satan took Jesus to the top of the mountain. He said, he said, I am pretty much over this world.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you pretty much call me God of this world.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I will be able, but he said, I am willing to step down from being the God of this world, and then you step in and you bow down to me. Because you talking about being the God of the world anyway, so it will be easy to just bow down to me.
All right, you're right. Anybody else? Exactly. He was tempting him to worship the things of this world, which are temporal, instead of realizing that he already had access to what's eternal. Same with us. He wants us to put so much focus on this world and the things of this world and worship those things, not recognizing that these things are meant to last. And then we're sacrificing our true worship and the one thing that's not only going to last, but the things of God control the things of this world. Yes, the enemy is the God of this world, if you want to call it, or the prince of this world, whatever you want to call it. But he's limited to the worldly aspect of it. God supersedes what he does here, and his spirit realm is eternal. So if we spend all of our time focusing on and worshiping the things of this world, then we're limiting what we have access to just what's tangible to us here. And we're missing out on the one true thing that's real, and that's what's going to be everlasting. All right?
What we have to realize is everything we got is here anyway.
Everything we have is here anyway. And the sooner you learn that, the better off you will be. Absolutely. Anybody else? All right, let's keep going.
Jesus if he would fall down and worship him. Jesus replied, "Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, him only shalt thou serve." This is true stewardship. Again he said, "Lo, I come to do thy will, O God." Hebrews 10:7-9. The disciples seemed confounded when Jesus, weary and tired, refused to eat what they had brought. He said to them, "I have meat to eat, that ye know not of. My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work."
What did Jesus mean by that? This happened after the woman at the well. And he had that encounter with her at the well. And they came trying to get him food, and he said, I'm good. What was he saying there, y'all? He hadn't eaten physically, had he?
God had already came and ministered unto him.
Very good. All right. Let's look at that. Let's turn to John, the 4th chapter. The Gospel of John. Let's see this. This may take up the rest of my time. It'll be worth it if we learn. Let's start at verse 7. And I'm going to read a little bit of it in this translation so we can kind of paraphrase it and hopefully hit our points. John, the 4th chapter, verse 7. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. And that was from the well. This is the woman at the well. "Give me a drink," Jesus said to her, for his disciples had gone into town to buy food. Now all of them were hungry. They leave Jesus at the well. They go to find food and drink at the town. But he stays at the well, okay? Number 9, verse 9. "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" She asked him. For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Verse 10, Jesus answered, "If you knew the gift of God and who is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would ask him and he would give you living water." Verse 11, "Sir," said the woman, "you don't even have a bucket and the well is deep. So where are you going to get this living water?" He talking about he going to give her water. He don't have anything to draw with. The way he's talking is not similar to what she's used to do. She's used to getting water and getting fulfilled a certain way. And now he's talking about giving her the same type of fulfillment, and he doesn't have the things that look like what she's used to. Y'all with me? All right, verse 12. "You aren't greater than our father Jacob, are you? And he's the one that gave us this well and drank from it himself." So they know that Jacob was this great man in their tradition, and he was the one that identified with the well, so that's what they're used to. Verse 13, Jesus said, "Everyone who drinks from this water is going to get thirsty again." I'm paraphrasing. "But whoever drinks from the water that I will give, that you don't understand how I'm going to give it to you, will never get thirsty again. In fact, the water I give you, or give him, will become a well of water springing up in eternal life." Goes back to what Arupi was saying a little while ago about the joy being inside and it's springing up. That's what he's talking about. When he gives you this water, when he gives you this fulfillment, it not only becomes what's needed for that moment, it becomes a living well inside of you that springs up and keeps providing for you long after your initial point of thirst. Y'all got that? That's what he's offering to her. Verse 15, "Sir," the woman said to him, "Give me this water." She got excited when she found her that. She said, "All right, I'm with you. Go ahead, give me this water so I won't get thirsty again or need to come here to draw water." This is what he says. "Go call your husband," he told her, "and come back here." She said, "I don't have a husband." He said, "You have said correctly. You don't have a husband." And he said, "Well, you had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband." Now, why would he call her out on all these? First of all, did he really call her out?
Yeah.
Kind of, but not really. He presented it, but she told on herself. Okay, so he kind of pointed and planted the seed to see what she was going to do with it. She could have very easily acted like she didn't have these issues. But once she acknowledged it, then he said, "You're right, you do have this issue." Why would he call out her issue though? Let's deal with it. To prove who he was as part of it.
No, she would not turn back and do that again.
All right, to know she wouldn't turn back and do it again. That's good.
To know that even though she had had done these things, that he still forgave her and he was ready for her to come to him.
Very good. That's getting even closer. That's a part of it. Anybody?
Was he hoping from a confession from her?
Yes. Not only was he hoping, a confession was needed.
Yeah.
Why was the confession needed? So she gets, y'all talk loud to me.
So that
And very good. He had to get her to acknowledge her sin so that he could help her with the sin, and then she would go back to the sin because the sin was preventing her from enjoying this living water. He was helping her understand you can't really benefit from this living water as long as you got these sin issues in your life. So let me go ahead and help you confess it. I already know it anyway. I'm not talking about you. I'm helping you deal with it so we can get past it because we got some living water we got to enjoy.
I think also he wanted to get her attention.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
I know who you are. I want you to know who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. He did. That was a part. All these things he accomplished in this one act to make sure she knew who he was, what he was able to do, and that she removed the issue that was keeping her in a place where she needed to continuously be filled. Y'all with me?
Yeah.
So God will allow sometimes us to have situations where we have to deal with our sin issues so that we can get it out of the way so that we can enjoy the living water.
Oh, I get it now.
You get it? Yeah.
The way he called her out,
Yeah.
he called us out.
He called us out. He called us out the same way. Not to embarrass us, not to demean us, but to make us accountable to what we're standing in the way of him being in full control of our lives.
Right.
So he's helping us get our own issues out.
It sounded rough there for me, but that's the way he called
It
us out.
sounded rough, but it was a purpose behind it, okay? All right, everybody got it? Questions, comments? All right, where do we stop? Verse, we're at 19, okay. She's confessed now. Sir, the woman replied, I see that you are a prophet. That's what y'all were talking about. Through that revelation, she also realized there's something different about him. He ain't exactly like everybody else. Verse 20, our fathers worshipped on this mountain, yet you Jews say that the place to worship is in Jerusalem. So she's saying if you're this person, they're used to worshiping in the temple in Jerusalem. But I just had a worship experience right here where we are. He's helping us realize you don't have to be in a traditional place to encounter God in this way. Okay? He will meet you at your point of need. You just got to recognize it when he shows up. Okay? All right? All right, everybody got it? All right, verse 21. Jesus told her, believe me, woman, an hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, because salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Yes, the Father wants such people to worship him. He was helping her realize that the restrictions that they were used to were no longer a separation between them and experiencing God for themselves. They also can worship God now because it's all about spirit and truth, no longer about a formality. All right, y'all with me? Amen. All right, verse 24. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. Verse 25. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ, and when he comes, he will explain everything. Well, watch him give her this revelation. I am he, Jesus told her, the one speaking to you. She had faith that he was going to come, so she had faith, and it was her faith that connected him, and now he helped her realize who he was, so she wouldn't have to keep waiting. And then when she found out who he was, let's see, where we at now? Where she leave a water bottle? Oh, verse 27. Then the disciples arrived. They were amazed that he was talking to this woman, yet nobody said anything. What do you want? Why are you talking to her? They saw him talking to this woman. They went, what's he over there doing talking to her? But they kind of sideways. They know he shouldn't be talking to her. Verse 28. Then the woman left her water jar, went into town and told the men, come see a man who told me everything I did. She wasn't ashamed anymore. She'd already dealt with her issues. Yes. Could this be the Messiah? And they left the town and made their way to him. In the meantime, the disciples kept urging him, Rabbi, eat something. They come up after the fact. They want him to eat because that's what they was going into town to do anyway. Verse 22. But he said, I have food to eat that you don't even know about. And then they said to one another, could somebody have brought him something to eat? They still thinking natural. They hadn't dialed into the spirit yet. Verse 34, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and finish his work. And he goes on to really make that plain to them. So Jesus was fulfilled by this woman's worship. And if I had time, I could talk to you a little bit about the water and what it represents when it comes to our worship. It's a cleansing agent. It's a purifying agent. And it is something that can restore you back to health. So he was offering her a deeper version of the natural thing she was used to. She wanted the natural water because that's what she was used to. That's what she was comfortable with to have her fulfilled. I'm trying to short it. But he was trying to give her a way to live so she wouldn't have to duplicate the same process of coming up short. She had voids in her life, and this represented how she went about living her life by trying to fulfill these voids in natural ways. But he offered her, and when she realized who he was, through her worship experience, a connection with the living water that now provides for those voids so that she no longer has to seek validation in unhealthy, unnatural ways. Now she connected to Jesus. He became a living water that supplied that initial need and continuously fed her as she moved forward. That's what he's offered to us. He wants to become a source of a provision beyond what we're used to in the natural, so that we don't just depend on what we're used to. Y'all get what I'm saying? Okay? So, I think we left off, where did we leave off on the book?
The last couple of sentences of the second paragraph.
Yeah, let's go ahead and finish that out.
When he was in Gethsemane, he prayed for deliverance from the cup. He said, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done.
All right, again, I wish I had time, but that ties back to what he also did it on the cross. Remember, he said, I thirst on the cross. That was the natural part of him, craving what we crave when we're seeking fulfillment. But in the garden and on the cross, he showed us how to submit our fleshly need, to let it die, so that we can now take hold of the spiritual fulfillment. Y'all get that? So this is another example of the difference between having your natural needs and having your spiritual needs, and learning how to make sure that your natural needs don't take place and rob you of tuning into what you really need spiritually. Because only what you get spiritually will satisfy you. Y'all keep it down for me down there just a little bit. Only what you get spiritually is going to satisfy you. Natural is temporal. Y'all get what I'm saying? Alright? And he said, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Making sure that his self-will dies to his God spirit will. Okay? And then Jesus, as our great example, is an ideal steward because he constantly showed us how to have these natural physical needs, but to seek God on how to stay connected with him. That's why when he was tempted, when he came, he stripped himself of his divinity so that that would not become his way of living. He humbled himself and became like we are and lived a life like we live so that he could demonstrate to us how to have these fleshly needs and desires and impulses, but then to seek God on a connection that sustains us through everything we go through. And that's what this is going to teach us as we look to him as how to be better stewards over what God is calling us to do. It's going to take us not relying on our self-dependence, our flesh, but learning how to tune into our spirit, draw off of those resources, and allow God to give us direction depending upon what our situation requires. All right, I gotta stop there. Questions or comments? I hope this is making sense to we. I don't want to confuse anybody.
Does that kind of go back to my people will humble themselves
Yes.
and pray, and then they will hear from heaven?
Yes, and even in that, I think we talked about that. That scripture, that's first Chronicles, I can't remember. But it's a process. It's an order to that. He said, if my people, first of all, who are called by my name, then they will humble themselves, turn from their wicked ways. Each one you have to do in order to get what he promised. If you don't do it, exactly. It's an order to it because he's trying to help us remove all the things that are preventing him from responding. But when we follow his steps and follow his guides and do what he says do, he always honors his promise in the end. But you're right. That's a good one to study on. All right, anybody else? Okay, so you got your question. We got our announcements. Next week, Hope 12, 7 o'clock. And the following week, we'll be back here.
Got one more announcement. You'll require practice tomorrow night at 6:30.
You need to choir practice tomorrow, 6:30. All right. All right. Any prayer requests or praise reports? Any prayer requests or praise reports?
Just got something like to ask the church to pray for my friend's daughter. She's in a bad car accident on Monday on her way to school this Spartan. She has several broken bones. She was a Birmingham hospital, now she's coming back to the hospital. And also pray for me.
Yes,
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah. First report, my daughter is getting ready to start college. Asking for prayers that she goes into this endeavor. God be with her, carry her through.
Absolutely. They'll do it.
Again, bringing co-worker Bill Smart, and also another co-worker, Dolores Smith, pray for both of them.
All right. Anybody else?
I'd like to pray for a young lady named Queen that she'll be able to receive her kids back.
All right.
Pray for one of my co-workers, April, that she'll go through her surgery.
All right. Anybody else? God is well pleased with the desire for us to cover and intercede for other people. We know the goodness of God. We know what he's able to do, but a lot of times people can't pray for themselves. But God honors faith wherever faith is demonstrated. So let us be mindful of those things that have been mentioned, and let's continue to thank God for the many things that he's always doing to show us that he's faithful and that he's just in our lives. I'm going to ask Reverend Washington if she will to give us an intercessory prayer tonight as we prepare to close.
Father, we come at this hour. Lord, we just thank you, God, for allowing us to make it through another day. Heavenly Father, you are such a good God. Heavenly Father, when danger is all around us, Lord, you have taken care of us. You've allowed us to assemble ourselves here once again. And Heavenly Father, as we gather here, God, we just thank you for your word. Lord, we thank you, God, that we've learned more and more how to worship you. Because you said in your word, they that worship you must worship you in spirit and in truth. And Father, we thank you for that word. Lord, we just praise your holy name because you are worthy to be praised. Now, Heavenly Father, you've heard, Lord, the names that were called around tonight, Lord. Lord, we know there's nothing you can't do. So, Father, whatever, Lord, your people stands in the need of, God, we just ask that you bless and take care of them, provide all that they need. And then, Heavenly Father, the young people that going off to college, Lord, God, we ask you, keep your arms of protection around them. Lord God, for there's so many out there, Lord, that deceiving the young people. So, Heavenly Father, we ask, Lord, that you just cover, Lord, all of the young people that's going off to college, high school, or whatever school they may be attending. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask you, Lord, bless all families connected, Lord, with this church. Be with us, Lord, as we gather here. And God, we just give your name the praise, the honor, and the glory. And we thank you, God, for Pastor Snodgrass. Heavenly Father, we just thank you, Lord, for what you're
Yes.
Strengthen him, Lord, and take care of him. Take care of his family. Don't forget about Reverend Remisha, Lord God. God, we thank you, God, for bringing her back to Bible study once again. Oh, God, we just thank you for her. God, continue to bless his family. Now, Heavenly Father, you know what's going on all over the world. God, we just ask, Lord, you take care of us. Oh, God, change things as only you can. Because you are in control. Man is not in control. God, you are in control. God, we just thank you now. We ask you to continue to be with us as we travel the dangerous highways, as we leave here tonight. God, just be with us. Keep us safely until we return to see one another once again. We just thank you now for us in the name of Jesus. And for his sake I pray. Amen. Amen.